Well, that's rather contrary, isn't it? It's hard to start when you're 15 because you don't realize you're against the war because they haven't asked you to fight yet. But you still have to have the resume, as you say, it isn't.
Well,
but you have to have the letters from people some years before.
It helps. I mean, that's if in a perfect world that'd be great if it worked that way. And how many people talk to draft councils or talk about these issues? So it's a hard thing to expect people to do. Maybe 15 is kind of young. In some cases that happens, but that's the hard situation. It's very difficult for a young man or a young woman even, and they have a draft for women in the future.
And then once I get to 21, I don't need it anymore.
Don't need what?
I don't need to prove I'm a conscientious objector if they're only going to draft 20-year-olds.
Not necessarily. It's good to be prepared no matter what. I mean, even 21, it's unlikely. Well, we don't know if they'll go beyond 21.
Well, we'll go to 22.
Well, the other thing is that they can change the rules at any time.
Now, you do have to speak loud.
Okay. They can change the rules at any time. So even though the system right now is set up in such a way that the first people to be called up if the draft came back would be the people turning 20 this calendar year, I know that during the Vietnam era that was changed. They changed the first priority year. First it was an older group, and then they decided to take a younger group. So I think the idea is to be prepared to think about how you feel about war, and especially as you're approaching the ages of 18, 19, 20, to really think about it. And every time you have a brainstorm or an idea or a thought about things that relate to your becoming a conscientious objector, just jot it down and throw it in a box or throw it in a file or a notebook, and just throw it all there. And then when the time comes, or if it looks like something's imminent, you have all your little pieces of paper, and maybe you meet someone and you have a good teacher one year who can write something for you, and just as you go along, try to accumulate these things. Say, any person that's applicable, any thought that you have. If you just read a book that makes you think about war, jot down a few notes about it, write down what you think, throw it in a box, and then if it seems like the draft might be coming back, you'll be in a good position to put a case together.
That's a good way to do it.
That's a good way to do you do outreach to high schools and such things then?
Yeah.
As an organization, you distribute pamphlets or tracts to high schools. Is this on a voluntary basis where you can take one if you want one, or do you make sure that each student has one?
Well, I mean, we can't print 10,000 copies for everybody, but we try to make copies available in guidance counselor offices and teachers and students.
And do you find that schools accept these materials?
Well, it depends on the school. We haven't outreached to a lot of schools yet, but and some may take them, some might have a fight. It's not guaranteed you can get in there. I mean, it depends on the principal. Some are ex-Marines that don't like to have this kind of stuff in schools. Some are more open to it, and some are in between. So it still is a fight to get into schools.
Okay, you're a Boston-based,
yeah.
Cambridge-based. So does Cambridge schools have this material?
They have some literature, right?
They have the material.
And
Somerville has the materials.
Some of the alternative schools have called us, and we've spoken at various teachings that came up during when the war was in India. So we did a lot of speaking then. People asked us to bring material, which was very nice. But I think it's something we're trying to do more and more of. I think, I don't know if you've talked about the history of BARD at all.
Just a little briefly.
But I think although the organization started a little bit before registration came back, I think that the organization got fairly dormant during the mid-'80s.
Right.
Until very recently, and now we're coming together again. We have lots of new people that are interested in working with us, and I think in a way we're kind of an open group, and where we see all these directions, and we're trying to figure out the best places to put our energy.
Okay.
And so if anybody wants to, this is a great time to get involved with it, because we're trying to do counter recruitment at the high schools. We're trying to present issues of registration, issues of what to do if the draft comes back, becoming a conscientious objector, and all the alternatives. And if people are interested in becoming involved, they should call the BARD hotline, which is 354-0931, and we'll get back to you.
What was that again?
354-0931.
Area code 617.
Right.
617. And BARD is associated with these other groups you mentioned earlier, directly?
Well, we're an independent group, but yeah, we belong, we're membership with Committee Against Registration in the Draft. But we have connections with NISBCO and CCCO.
Yeah, so people are encouraged to get involved. It's a great organization to work with. You work with a lot of young people. It's exciting because a lot of young people really are thinking about these issues. There are a lot of young people that aren't, but quite a few people call up and they say, I know I'm a conscientious objector, or I'm against all war. I know that. What should I do next? And that, to me, is very exciting to see that happen.
In the period, say from about November through February, we've had hundreds of calls come in on our line and to our draft councils, like Judy and many other draft councils we have. Most of them, 99% of them, were people looking for CO status. We had mostly college-age kids, high school-age kids, a few parents. There was a woman from Everett, Revere, who had twin sons, and she wanted them to have literature about how to become COs. And we sent literature out to them.
So these were 40-year-old parents who were making the phone calls?
Yeah, maybe older.
People who went through the Vietnam War and said, oh, well, we know we have to set this up first?
Maybe in some cases not. I mean, some were not so...
Now, how long has BARD been in?
1979.
1979. Why, during Ronald Reagan's term, when we had one of the most warlike presidents until Bush came along, obviously, wasn't it as big, or why wasn't the push there then?
BARD was very active between 79 and 84. I did a lot of direct actions at post offices, demonstrations, sit-ins, lobbying, education, draft counseling, training, tremendous amount of activity.
So you have been?
Oh, it happened through that, but it did become when registration, the draft was they tried to initiate a draft in early 1980. That was defeated. Massive efforts to defeat that. Then the registration just kept on going. I said, we don't want to have a draft, and things fell dormant. Now, with the war starting up, people felt the draft was threatened, and that's when they were calling about how to be COs and so on.
And they felt a threat of a draft when the war started.
Yes, and as soon as the war supposedly ended, all of a sudden the calls stopped.
Yes, just recently.
And I think that's interesting. Well, in a way, it's kind of typical. But they could bring the draft back at any time. The papers were all reworked and the system was all put in. Well, the system was never left, but all the new paperwork was done in the early 80s.
Okay, now they're talking about, you're speaking specifically about a military draft. At various times they've come up with a draft on a draft for service. A straight service draft instead of for military service, conservation corps,
national service.
National service,
yeah.
Yes. Are you also against the national service?
We're against the mandatory national service.
The mandatory national service.
Because it's very dangerous. Because not many people know about this. National service. It sounds, a lot of liberals support national service. It sounds like a great idea. Every young person, 18 to 22. Puts in 2 years of service to the country doing work for nonprofit agencies or for conservation or hospitals or whatever it may be. In other words, let's get out of the selfish, everything for me and nothing for the country attitude and force a mandatory national service down for everybody. But as good as that may sound, there's a lot of problems with that because, again, this has come out of Congress and the Pentagon is very much behind the scenes with this or is watching over this because young men are needed for the military. They're always watching for these age groups of manpower they need from the military. And congressmen and senators like Sam Nunn had a bill that was very punitive. It would do away with all federal student loans and have a mandatory national service for people that would give them points for student loans only if they went through 2 years of national service.
That was for male and female. Your selective service draft is for males only.